Thank you for listening to Lone Star Community Radio. This program was broadcasted and recorded live from the LSCR studios in downtown Conroe, Texas. Lone Star Community Radio is supported by listeners like you. Donate and sponsor today. For more information on getting involved with Lone Star Community Radio, contact us at lscrstudios@gmail.com or visit us online at www.irlonestar.com.
Welcome back to the Misunderstood Show. We have a very special guest again. We have George Stablein. He is with Worth National Insurance. It's underwriting for title insurance. He's a real estate attorney, and he knows all things title insurance. He's been doing this since the beginning.
Before there was land.
Yeah. So
back in the old days, before we were a country.
You're going to write a book about the beginning of title insurance?
No. There are books, sadly, about people who write about title insurance.
But you should write a book about your experience back in the dark ages.
Before there was electricity.
Yeah.
Well,
do you still have those stones?
Mm-hmm. I keep them at home just to remind me of my humble beginnings.
Nice.
No, nobody goes into title insurance unless you're born into it.
I went into it, and I wasn't born into it.
That's what I just said. Unless you're born into it, or you don't know what you're doing, and all of a sudden you're in.
Yeah, they tricked me.
See, it's the most important, some would say, but the most unknown part of the real estate process.
Oh, it is, by far.
But it's necessary.
People have no idea what it is, and that's what we're here to talk about.
Well, it's sad dynamic when the people who use us, it's not a great business model, which I think we're doing better explaining what we are,
but
our importance.
Absolutely 100% need to have title history.
Well, you do. They've shown, first of all, if you want a loan, because banks aren't going to lend money unless they have some security.
And why is that?
Well, because in the old days, before there was, and they wanted to be backed by an insurance company like Worth National.
So a good one,
so they can come back to us if there is a title defect.
And you answer the phone.
I do answer the phone unless it's, unless they use my other name, then I know I don't want to talk to them.
What's your other name?
Sexton Hardcastle is the name I go by, and I don't want to be seen. Whatever.
It's your hotel name.
It's a name. But what happened is what the security instrument works, they need somebody, because they're not going to lend money, and they've done studies that separate, like, do you know in Cairo, Egypt, 75% of the land there has no land title, nothing. No way of proving who owns it.
Common in third world countries.
It is. In fact, in Africa, one of the things they were trying to do under the Clinton Global Initiative.
In the 90s?
Mm-hmm. After he got out, he being President Clinton, one of the things he identified was the problems in Africa of banks investing into Africa. And one of the reasons they did, as the story goes, is the banks had no security to prove who actually owned that piece of property. Because what you would do, I've never thought about this, but being a dictator would be cool, like for a day, and then, might not be as cool.
Just take all the land,
what you do is you take and you burn the courthouses down. Why do you burn a courthouse down? Because in the courthouse you have records. So if you burn everything down, so they've been trying to work on it, because here's the theory, which is kind of...
It's not like they've scanned all those records in.
Well, what they would do is start over, and then digitally do those, and then put them in a database outside of the area. Because if you could do that, then a bank could lend money to a person. And if the person has that security, they could build irrigation systems.
Right.
They can build...
they can get loans
They get loans to machines to build crops. The other thing you can do is, so if they start building more crops, they feed each other, which is always a problem in Africa.
Right.
But they also could sell their goods. They'd have more goods to sell. With more goods comes more income. The other thing you would have, which really gets in prosperity, and the other thing you would have is education. So the most important resource a lot of these African nations have is their labor force, which is children.
But they are very educated in a different way than we're educated. They're actually more educated in a lot of ways better than our children.
Well, my children,
they have life skills.
Again, there's the
they know how to survive.
They do.
And they know how to hustle, and they know how to sell, and they know how to...
But imagine if they also had the ability to go to school and get then they come back to their job. So now what you're doing is you're bringing back to the country teachers, lawyers, doctors.
Why do you need those?
Why do you need doctors or
lawyers?
Well, you need lawyers because if you don't have lawyers, if you decide you're going to have a however you want to look at it, a democracy or republic, it could be a monarchy, whatever.
Do they have lawyers in non-democracy?
They do.
institutions?
There's lawyers everywhere. They just have different functions. Because some they have court. Everybody has a court.
Because if you don't have any rights in your country, then what's the point of having a lawyer?
Well, why would you have a trial that you know the ending of it, but you have a lawyer? Like in Russia, there's a lot of lawyers. Cuba, lawyers.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And they work in the best interest of the people?
Oh, I'm sure they would. That's what
I feel
we're
like they
supposed
just pay
to do.
people off.
No.
I mean, even in our country, they do that.
I wouldn't know anything about that. I would not. But the reasons they had lawyers at first is when I got sworn into the bar, we had a guy swear us in. He said one of the reasons that lawyers became is they were the only ones who could read. Because if you didn't have rules and laws, it was the caveman with the biggest stick would come in. So back a long time ago, they started writing these rules.
Right. Wasn't it like philosophers kind of started in that?
When they weren't doing drugs, yeah, Plato, Aristotle, they throw ragers, drink some absinthe, they would smoke some hash, do some Molly.
How do we know this?
It's in the records. Big they do a bunch of ecstasy and go to like raves, and then they come up with all these ideas.
Raves?
Mm-hmm. Big raves back in the day.
Yeah. They have like pacifiers and stuff.
Socrates was a big raver. People don't know that, but
I mean, a lot of philosophers believe in kind of expanding their mind with natural substances.
They do.
Back then, they were mostly natural. You weren't getting them at a pharmaceutical company.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of fentanyl.
Yeah, I mean, you're like growing peyote or whatever the Native Americans.
Which is funny is no matter, because there's no connection between different parts of the world, but yet some of the commonality was our ability to find things that expanded our mind.
Well, I mean, they went over the strait, the
Bering Strait.
The Bering Strait.
That's a big deal.
That was a long time ago.
All
the way down to South America.
South America. Then they went away. That's why we're only 48 miles between the closest point of the United States and Russia.
Right.
Which people forget about now.
That's crazy to think about. But it's not like people want to go there.
To Alaska?
To the
Bering Straits?
Yeah. It's
I've never wanted to go up there.
It's a little rough.
I mean, what would you do?
Hide out in an igloo.
You would igloo it, but I
don't even like cold weather here.
But the thing about title insurance and the attorneys and whatnot is it's a necessary evil.
So is there a title on everything in the United States?
No, there are some that are. There theoretically there should be, but I don't think that's the case. There are land records in all. They're just to different levels of, which is one of the reasons Texas is so great because we're universally held to have the best land record system. One of the reasons.
Is that because we were like one of the later states to be formed?
There's a few things. I think it's the fact that we were one of the few. We started. Plus, we had some wars. You know, Texas was a country. Mexico wasn't wild about it.
We wanted to prove this was our land.
So one of the things you always try to prove is by having
documents,
patents and things like that. And that's why they would bring people, like Davy Crockett. He was hanging in Tennessee with the hat. Or it was Daniel Boone. They both actually were hanging. And they were offered land and whatnot.
What did he say? Davy Crockett? Screw y'all, I'm going to Texas. What does he say?
Something about you could have hell, I'm going to Texas.
Y'all go to hell, I'm going to Texas.
Something.
I have a painting of, it looks like Davy Crockett. This older lady painted. I won it in an auction for a charity. Mm-hmm. It's massive. It's in my living room. Mm-hmm. She hand painted this beautiful. It looks like Davy Crockett crossing a river and there's like mountains. Yeah. But I want to put a little plaque on it that says, y'all can go to hell, I'm going to Texas.
That'd be cool.
As some people say, HE, double hockey stick.
That's what they call it. So I think that the other reason that in Texas our land records are better is, and this is kind of counterintuitive, is we have a higher insurance rate. Our title insurance premiums are higher than in other states because we're fully regulated.
TDI regulates everything.
Everything.
They set the rate for all title companies.
The only thing they don't set rates on are escrow fees.
Right.
But everything else is right in the code. It says totally regulated industry.
Escrow fee is minimal.
Sorry?
The escrow fee is very minimal.
Compared to the risk.
Right.
I mean, which is something that I think we don't do a good enough job, is we whatever the escrow fee is. But people forget in Texas, what's different than other states. I came from California. You would have a separate escrow company and a separate title company. They did different functions.
Oh yeah.
Someplace.
So
in
like
Texas,
it's like
we
the
do
difference
everything.
between a deed and a title. So one's doing the deed and one's doing the title.
Like actually closing and escrowing, taking the money. And in Texas, they do both things. So at any time right now, title companies have maybe billions of dollars in their escrow fees. And because of that risk, we have the escrow fee, but it doesn't near cover the risk. And
right, because we pay out claims how often? I mean,
we pay off, so 1 out of every 3, this is...
you pay a small claim.
When Sexton Hardcastle goes to Vegas, if I had these odds, or if he had these odds, he would bet this all the time.
This is your alternate ego.
As he refers to himself in the third person, yes. But if he was to be there and I had this ability to bet on something, 1 out of every 3 closings has a title issue.
Right. We see it all the time.
It could be as innocuous as getting a deed from an ex-husband. It could be as child support. It could be as major as divorces, death, wills. It could be as simple as the bank that paid off the loan didn't file a release.
That's right.
So
or any release for any kind of. It could be medical. It could be credit card. Mm-hmm. It could be from 15 years ago. It could be from a previous owner.
That's exactly right.
It could be from a previous owner's brother.
In our escrow, our title, I view it, others are different. So my opinion is part of our title premium is to fix things.
Right.
To
protect your property.
If State Farm had a weather machine, and they might, but let's just assume they don't. And they could stop a hurricane from hitting, like when Burl was here.
Like on the movie Twister?
Yeah.
Where they put aluminum in the Twister?
Right. Well, that could happen.
That would be really bad for your health.
Well.
To put aluminum in the air.
I'm sure it wouldn't be good, but if I had a chick be in aluminum or have my house wiped out, I might take a risk. But
then you're going to get cancer and die.
I won't. But Sexton Hardcastle doesn't get cancer. But what I'm saying is if we paid for that, you'd pay more for your premiums if you could create protection because other types of insurance is casualty. Something bad happens.
Because they're going to prevent it. It's preventative.
So it's preventative. And so that's one of the reasons we make those requirements that we do.
Well, we don't want to pay out any more claims than we have to.
No, we have to pay out some or we don't have an industry.
I mean, surveys are wrong. And people think on new builds you don't need to go through title. And I'm like, there are builders all the time that have wrong surveys. They put it on the wrong lot. They've documented it incorrectly. Mm-hmm. They're going through their own title company. So that's not in the best interest of the buyer. It's a conflict of interest to me.
What I would say is, because we have some agents who are builder oriented, and I would say, in the whole scheme of things, they do a great job. All of them do. But what they do is keep that extra layer of protection. So then the banks will lend the money. In the escrow, the easiest way to know what an escrow is?
Right.
So I'll give you an example of what my first escrow experience.
Okay.
You ready for this? I was in 6th grade, Seattle, Washington. We had a guy. So I was trading my Evel Knievel action figure, which was. I bought another one because I pretend to be Evel Knievel and I jump things. It's cool.
Yeah, he was cool in
Evel
the
Knievel
70s,
deck.
60s,
Cool guy.
70s.
See, he knows.
Creative.
Yeah,
He used to wear leather. We used to have a cane with wild turkey in it. I mean, how cool is that?
I don't remember that, but I do remember his red, white, and blue outfits.
Well, but I traded that for, I forget the baseball card. And the guy didn't give me the baseball card and ran. He was bigger than I was. So he took my Evel Knievel action figure and kept his, and that's not cool. So Crazy Larry was a guy who in our street, everybody should have a crazy guy in your neighborhood. I'd suggest you have one. And he had a hat. And so what I decided to do is what he would do is you would have, from that on, when we were trading baseball cards, you'd put both the cards in Crazy Larry's hat, and then he would give them to each other. And the price was $0.25. So Crazy Larry was the first escrow officer I ever met, escrow company. But what he did,
keeping things fair.
He did, because one guy tried to run, and here's a rule of thumb: never make a guy whose nickname is Crazy mad.
We used to have a guy named Looney,
crazy, wacky.
He was a big, scary. He was a big teddy bear.
Yeah, but
until he needed to not be.
So Crazy flipped out and beat the what out of this kid, and after that nobody messed with Crazy Larry. But that's what we do as the escrow side. So not only do we get,
but we don't beat people up.
I try not to. I try to keep my anger in check. I'm kind of a rage monster, but
I know, I can tell by all those pictures of your grandson.
well, he's
You seem pretty mean.
he's pretty cool.
He looks like he's terrified.
No, he hasn't. He thinks no, he's not terrified of Papa at all. But so that's what, when we talk about title insurance, that's what we should do a better job. But we have to do a better job of what we're not.
Right. So can you explain to people what the difference between a title and a deed is?
Sure. So a title is the way I look at it, and others look at it different, is title is the actual outcome of a deed. It's when we run title, what we're really doing is reviewing all the records, the land records, which we pay a lot of money to maintain. So that's the other thing that goes into the cost of
You're
title
taking
insurance.
The history
of the property.
through the county or the courthouse.
It's a land record, so each county has their land record system.
Right.
We also we'll look for divorces or any deaths, because what we do is taxes,
child support liens.
So we look, that all will be a matter of public record, and that's one thing I tell people.
Errors
Could be
happens more often than not.
Thing I would say
Fraud.
about. I'm sorry. Fraud. We have one right now, we've resolved it, but it was a lady who kind of forgot to mention her stepkids. Mm-hmm. And and somehow hid the fact that and we ran title, and it would have been really difficult to ascertain it. And then the kids came out, and they weren't really tight with their stepmom.
But I thought stepkids were not a part of an inheritance.
They were her stepkids. They were the deceased husband's children. So So when you look at it this way, when you talk about heirs, I get it all the time. So it's kind of a totem. You know what a totem pole is?
Yeah.
Yeah, in Seattle, where we're up for,
your ranking
of
importance.
Like when Sasquatch was out, he was always
the firstborn son gets everything.
Well, not anymore. That's the first thing I tell people is because I'll get that. Well, I'm the firstborn. Well, all right, King William.
I'm the firstborn.
I am too, but my sister gets everything anyway, because that's a whole other story.
Because she's a girl.
Okay, we'll go with that. But the first would be your spouse.
Right.
That's number one. So if you don't have a will. So if people call and say, "Hey," and they have a will, your current spouse. If you want your ex-spouse to get something, leave it in the will. And I have people who have done that, leave something for their ex-spouses.
Especially if they have children.
So they can't. So what I always tell people is, when I'm doing a class on this tomorrow, is if there's a deceased person, we have to make sure they're dead, because we have insured times when people say they were dead and they're not dead. And that's a bad claim, by the way. When they just show up, you're like, "Hey, you're dead," and they're not. You can't win.
Or they sell their property without them being dead.
Yeah. So you say, "Yeah," and it happens. Surprisingly,
kids do it to their own parents. It's so weird.
Elder fraud, elder abuse is rampant. One of the things. The other thing I would tell you, title insurance, and I think about my 28 years. Not that I've prevented anything, but I can tell you, escrow officers like Christy, who works with you, have prevented things of elder abuse, because we'll say, "Hey,
right,
we have to talk to the mom." Well, you can't talk to her because she's, and then that's when we would require a guardianship. So your spouse, in Texas now everywhere, spouses are your traditional married spouses, ceremony, the whole thing. Can be common law spouses, and Texas has a common law spouse statute. And
do they entitle, and somebody asked me this the other day, and I actually didn't know the answer. Are they recognizing gay marriages?
Yeah, absolutely. So not that's just not Texas, that's the whole United States. There was a case, oh gosh, Oben Kirk, and people, our competitors are watching this going, "Oh, you didn't know this. Get over yourself." You know what I'm talking about. There's 2 Supreme Court cases. One was a couple who adopted in one state, moved to another state that didn't recognize same-sex marriages, and one of them passed away. And another one was about benefits. So the Supreme Court, if you look at it this way, they're the Supreme Court. That's why elections are so important, because the president's the one who can put people on the Supreme Court. No matter what your political persuasion is. That's always should be your number one, in my opinion.
If you have a corrupt president,
or whoever you have,
it corrupts the whole system.
Well, and remember, the Supreme Court justices are not term limited, so they can literally be forever. So when you have we have Supreme Court justices in their 40s and 50s now, which I think is okay, but they're going to be around for 30 years. So
At least.
So to backtrack, every state had a different same-sex statute. Texas just didn't reckon, in my opinion, the way it was written. Not only do they not recognize them, you can't have them.
Right.
Hawaii did. Massachusetts was one of the first ones.
Right.
Vermont. There were different states. California.
Right, and they were moving there to get
They would.
married.
And then they would have, so finally, when that happens, when you have a bunch of states, so back in the 1770s, we had this war. The British got a little uppity. We smacked the snot out of them. George Washington went across to Delaware, like Hulk Hogan, with the 24-inch pythons. And you didn't know about this part?
I didn't know about the pythons.
Put the American flag right through the British guy's heart and said, "Take that." You didn't know that happened?
No.
It's well, look up your
I don't
history.
remember that being in my history book.
Well, you missed it. But anyways, we win, right? Well, the problem is, have you ever thrown a badass party and then afterwards you're like, well, what are we going to do? Or you come up with a great idea and then you're like, well, now what? Right? When we started Worth National,
I just threw one.
Oh, well, there you go. Anyways, what happened was we had 13 colonies, right? And the last thing the 13 colonies wanted to do is be told. Like a New Yorker never wants to be told, even nowadays, forget about it. They're not going to be told by a New Jersey guy. And a Massachusetts guy is going, I will not be told what to do with their bad, right? So
it's like Dallas and Fort Worth.
So the federal court was formed to say, amongst other things, if the states can't agree upon something, they can intervene.
Oversee everything.
They're supreme, so they have supremacy. So
the
way I looked at it is and there's
like
the 14th Amendment, there's different
slavery and
there's different amendments that kind of were added on, the Commerce Clause, things of that nature, in my opinion. So the Supreme Court said we're going to have a uniform rule. And the uniform rule is that it's called the Defense of Marriage Act. You can look at one way or another.
Okay.
And it basically said that we recognize same-sex unions regardless of the state.
Right.
That's the way, from a title company, that's how we looked at it. We looked at it before then.
But it's still, and everybody just needs to have a will.
The best thing to do is to have a will, because what happened in those situations, anytime they would come, almost every time I'd say, well, if you have a will, because a will, you could do anything.
And it can be handwritten.
It can be handwritten. I'd prefer, what I would suggest is
it to be with an attorney or notarized.
Have good witnesses and witnesses that aren't.
But if you want to handwrite something.
Oh, absolutely.
And you want Chrissy to notarize it.
Mm-hmm. I've seen
she's just got to verify ID.
Some of my greatest legal work has been on cocktail napkins. No.
We had a deal. Well, I say we. When I was in real estate, I had an investor who, previous to knowing him, he did a deal on a napkin at a bar.
Can do it.
While people were intoxicated.
That's a problem.
And there was liens. And he didn't go through a title company.
Well, that's...
And then he wanted to go through a title company when he sold it because the buyer wanted to go through a title company.
Yeah. That's the other thing I would tell you. If you have,
I was like, dude.
If you have property right now and you didn't get it with a title policy...
I'm like, you don't really own this.
You might not. Well,
because the person was intoxicated.
Yeah, you could attack. So
because the guy came back. We said, we really need him to sign off on this because...
We do. That's part of the whole process. Is we create the land records.
And that guy said, I was intoxicated. I don't remember doing that.
Yeah.
Took the money.
Mm-hmm. You remember the money part.
So then the investor had to pay him more money. And then he had to pay the liens that he owed because he was already in this contract. He was making a huge profit, though. He bought the property for like $6,000 and turned around and sold it for like $28,000 like a week later.
See? So it's an investment.
That might be a different deal, but I know it's something like that, right?
Well, people think sometimes title insurance is investment insurance or investment protection. That's not what it is, but it's not.
And now he goes through title every single time.
So
because he thought it was a scam. He was like, "This is a ripoff.
Oh,
Insurance is a ripoff." And I'll be honest, when I first got into real estate, I didn't know what title insurance was. And I have a history of insurance background, like P&C.
Sure.
But I didn't understand title insurance. I'm like, what are we insuring?
Most people even start.
What are we paying for? Because I feel like a lot of insurance is unnecessary. People are over-insured. But this is this is, to me, I would rather drive around without car insurance than not have title insurance.
Well, particularly now that you see on TV, particularly down here, more and more frauds and things of that nature when they don't go through a title company. So you get what you pay for and take your risk. That's why if you come to a title company. Yeah.
And there was a deal where it was a guy was selling his house and he had inherited it from his parents, and he paid off. He had 5 siblings that he paid off, and he didn't go through a title company. Mm-hmm. They just did it like a quick claim or whatever. Mm-hmm. Just a
sure.
Or it was I can't remember if it was quick claim or. Anyway, he had one of his siblings. They had to go back and get everybody to sign off on it when he went to sell. Mm-hmm. Because he didn't go through a title company, just with his own family. And his brother had $125,000 in child support that he had. You don't have to pay the whole thing, but he had to pay a huge portion to get the AOG to sign off on it.
Yep.
Or, the district attorney really is what it goes to, is they have to sign off and say, okay, that mom says, okay, $75,000 will suffice her. And he had to pay that for his brother, who is a deadbeat dad.
Wow.
And he wasn't like that. We're not always like our siblings, right? You can't judge somebody by their siblings. Please. I have siblings, so I love them, but we're all very different.
My mom's going to watch this, so I love my sister.
We only have one sibling?
I have one sibling.
Oh, I have 4 brothers, so I can say things about my brothers. They don't know which one I'm talking about.
I have step brothers and sisters I've never met, but
well, all mine are half brothers.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm all right. I'll get through this somehow, but I have no burning desire to meet them right now. But
so you just don't. So even like if you have, you inherit something, or you do it through family, and you trust your. And it's not that his brother was trying to rip him off, but his brother didn't have the money.
Well, and that's.
Had he gone through a title company,
believe it
he
or
would
not,
have been released of that.
People are surprised when we tell them. Most times, people are good. So, like when.
And he paid his brother off.
Well, see, that's the
earlier.
thing. You hear about the salacious, like the ex-husband who won't now sign off on the lien. They usually do. So remember, we have spouses. We have. So after spouses are children and not stepchildren.
Right.
And this is if you don't
But half children.
Yeah,
half, it's considered a whole children.
Half is a whole adopted children, legally adopted, or whole children. I have one of each. They both have the same rights. Then you have parents, and then you have siblings. So you always hear, well, I was Uncle George's favorite. That's a horrible imitation of my niece, so if she hears this, she'll know exactly what I'm trying. I thought I was your favorite, therefore I should get. The siblings take, so the nieces and nephews by themselves, stepchildren, can if you adopt them. So when somebody...
What if you raised them their whole life?
No, then you would do a will.
Right.
So like my grandfather raised my mom. He wasn't her, right. So it was through a will.
We had somebody come back there he raised me since I was born.
Adopted or put in a will.
Right. And we were like, we're sorry.
Yeah.
And this poor person, both parents were gone, and they didn't have a will. And
they don't have a will, so
the other siblings were like, sorry.
The only thing you can do, and I'm not giving free legal advice, but some advice is, remember, a court can always, some lawyers will be like the ones going, well, that's not exactly true. You know who I'm talking about. Real brainiac lawyers will. But us simple dirt lawyers can say, if a court
generally
were, if a court were, if a court were, if you have a gripe, you could take it to the court.
Anybody can.
And if you have an issue of title, my suggestion is I'm not telling people just to file things of record, but I can tell you we go by what's of the real property records.
Well, this is my other thing is I had a deal come in where 2 attorneys got together and did the title, issued the title, but they weren't a title insurance company. They didn't go through title insurance. They just wrote up some documents, and they didn't do so they don't have access. If you're just a real estate attorney and you don't work for a title company, you don't have access to a plant for all these documents to get all these different histories.
Well, there is one way you can. And so the state bar, and I would tell you in Texas, compared to most states, attorneys here are more title
efficient Yeah.
than any other. So we do have what's called
Texas is always better.
it's procedural rule 22. So if you have an attorney that you're using, God bless you, that's great. If they're doing a title opinion, amazing. They have
But there's no insurance.
Well, you get two things.
And they could miss something.
Ask them if they're using a P22 agreement so they can get those research done, which is probably worth it. If I was an attorney, but I don't want to speak for other attorneys. And this, what you do then is you're accepting their attorney's opinion. And if there is a problem, you can go back to that attorney, but you don't have the insurance policy. So
good luck with that, though.
Yeah, well, I would just say most attorneys, well, a lot of attorneys, well, I'd say the majority of attorneys, if they're doing closings, do a really good job. And the reason they do it, they're a fee attorney. Mm-hmm. So it'd be like George Jones, fee attorney for McKnight Title. So McKnight Title gives them the title work.
Right.
Or they have a P22 agreement for a certain closing with McKnight Title.
Right.
Those two, you still have that protection. The consumer has the protection of that. But if it's just them going to the courthouse, because you could, I mean, in theory, you could go to a courthouse and do examining. I have a friend who got into business from his family, and he used to go to the courthouse every morning in Abilene, Texas, and do like old school. I lived in
Abilene for a while.
So, that's what I would say to that. But you do what
it's a very small courthouse.
It is. So, but what I would say is to people who are looking for.
But if you're in Houston. Good luck going to the courthouse. Getting records there.
No, it'd be difficult. They'll tell you not impossible, and I would tell you have the right to those, but just it will be keep in mind
it's a full-time job.
It's a full-time job where the title being more digitalized in the last 20 years, you could buy a click and a spread. We can find out within, and that's one thing I would say not to promise what other companies do, but if you are a real estate professional and you have a listing. And you have the ability just to look to see who's in title, that may not be the worst thing to do because you want to make sure your contract seller matches who we have in title.
Correct.
Because if you are a real estate agent.
We had one come in the other day. Chrissy was like, dude, they don't even own this property. Mm-mm. They don't even own it, and they're trying to sell it to this person.
Yeah. So anytime
and we had one where it was a junior and a senior, but they didn't put junior and senior down.
I don't do that.
And juniors can sell the property under senior's name without senior even knowing because they don't document all the time. Senior didn't think about documenting. He wasn't a senior maybe when he bought it. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, sometimes I'm a junior, and sometimes that goes the other way around.
Right.
But I digress.
And then what about the 23andMe now?
Well, that's so a couple things about that hasn't happened.
I heard of a deal that happened recently where an error came about and said
23andMe, but that by itself. So 23andMe by itself, and I know a little bit about this with my son, is you're able to find out stuff.
Right.
But that by itself, I don't believe is to be admissible. As far as you would have to go a little farther.
But these people were trying to sell their property.
And
the dad died, and they were selling this property, and this person came from 23andMe and said, "Oh, well,
that's my dad,"
and it was the dad.
Yeah, well, you get,
and then they had to split it with that person.
If you establish that in court, now just remember everything has to go through a court. So just listen, like in Dallas, I love the TV show Dallas.
Yeah, but these people were like millionaires.
Well, so was Jock Ewing.
She got a lot of
money.
Thank
you very much. Jock Ewing had that illegitimate son, Ray Krebs. He was the fourth Ewing brother, and JR would be like, "You're not a real Ewing. Only Bobby and I are the real Ewings, Daddy." And he'd get all mad, but they never went to court. You have to go to court. So that's what I would say. Or you adopt them, though you technically don't have to adopt your own child.
That's right.
And if they're passed away. So what happened is we've had that, but you have to. What we go by is what is of record.
Right.
So if somebody were to come in and say, "Hey, you're my dad," I'd be like, "Oh," but the person either accepts that and agrees to that, or they get a court order saying it's determining paternity.
Right.
And once we would get that, then you move forward.
With DNA now, that's pretty easy to do.
But it's a court to decide. That's one thing I want people to hear is that
it's a court to decide.
Because I just had one this morning where it was pretty obvious what was going on, But it's not for the title. Remember this: title companies, we're not courts.
Right. We're not deciding.
We're
who
not the
gets
final
what.
decider. So I try to be as nice as I can, but sometimes I don't. I do care, but if I were to say I really don't care, what I'm trying to say is I need to be able to. A good rule of thumb is if you do it, go like this. Now, next time I tell you that, point to that thing there. Point to your cup. Oops. Cover your mouth. Point to them. I'll do that. I know what that is because I said if I told you point to your cup.
Oh.
And there was a record that says that is
Right.
your cup, and it's filed of record. I don't have to listen to you anymore. I can go. That's so when people tell us that, it's one thing I tell people.
It's not that you don't care. It's just that.
Oh, sometimes I don't.
Your job is to do what the facts are. We can only go by
Right.
the facts.
And so what I tell if real estate people are listening to this is before you go to your title company ahead of time, and what I say is develop a plan of attack.
Right.
So if you have an error issue, right? You have somebody saying that was my dad, whatever.
There's a lot of questions about this now.
So what I would say is we need a court order. And this is my opinion. So if anybody's a competitor and they're listening to this and you want to disagree with me, that's fine. That's one thing I will tell you is in Texas, we really just compete on our underwriting. Well,
Right.
not just, but because we charge the same amount. So
For everybody.
it's service and our underwriting decisions. And I was raised old school. So
And I didn't know the difference between that. I was a realtor, and then I got to work. I went to work for these big companies, corporate. I never spoke to an attorney. The whole time I worked there, I never got to speak with one attorney. I had to call underwriting, who had to call the attorney, and then they had to call. Well, actually, it was I talked to my the agent talked to me. I talked to the escrow officer. The escrow officer talked to underwriting. Underwriting talked to the attorney. Then the attorney would come back, and sometimes there's miscommunication. Then what if you have another question when they come back?
Yeah.
And that it doesn't suffice
Well,
you. So you're going through 5 different people.
Right.
Where here, I can say, George, so-and-so wants to call you, Lacey Baker or whoever has an issue. And can I give them your cell phone number? Can they give you a call? They have a question. And you would say, yes, Karen, please give her my number. Thank you for the heads up. I don't mind talking to her
I don't
and giving
mind
her
talking.
some advice.
And a lot of title companies, you would ask their opinion to do that. One thing I would just tell people is if you do that, we're not representing
You said
you.
do a lot
I
today.
know. We're not representing you. I would just tell you if we are
Right.
to insure,
Right, you're just giving
it's
them.
a
you're
subtle
answering some
distinction. Like
questions.
if you came to me, like for instance, about an airship, and I'd say I need airship affidavits, or you got to go to court. That's why I tell people, I say, what's the end result? If the
It's
end
more of you just advising them what they need to do.
yeah, and I think
Or what they need to advise their client to do.
I agree, and so I think anytime you have a sale and there's anything that's beyond, or just be ready to when we run title, that's going to be your roadmap, and the goal is not to argue with the title company because our goal is to get the closing done. Now
Right.
I made a decision, and I forget. Well, no, it was something
And
about
quickly.
a deed. It was some in the chain like 40 years ago.
Right.
When I went through it, the likelihood of somebody coming out of 40 years
A
ago.
mechanic's lien, $5,000 from 40 years ago.
So we make those, but that's the decision that you want to get to the underwriting.
Well, and that was
a
a deal that you and Christy had, I think, that it was like 4 title companies had turned it down. And y'all are like, dude, the chances of these people coming back is,
It's your boss.
yeah, I see that. Is he my boss?
I don't think we have bosses in our company. Well, unfortunately, I'm one of them, so I hope to God we have better ones than
Well, I
me.
feel like everybody is my boss.
Oh, stop.
I mean, I'm kind of my own boss,
Yeah,
too.
you
at
are.
the
That's
same
right.
time.
So I think what I would get out of this is that title insurance, the difference between a title and a deed is title is the whole story.
Yeah.
A deed is a chapter to get to the story. So you want to deed. We want to run. So when we run,
A deed is the paperwork leading up to the title.
I gave you a deed. There you go.
And then another deed sometimes.
So you have multiple deeds sometimes. And
Right.
what we have to make sure is when we it's like we're running a story. And at the end of the story, when you always want to see where title is vested, who is doing this, things of that nature. And we provide, not only do we provide an opinion, but we provide a document.
Right. So the deed is basically the documents that say the title belongs to this person.
That's the title. The deed would be the document within the title. So if I run title, I'm running a run sheet that shows all the deeds that have been on that property.
Right.
And those deeds and liens and
That's kind of what I mean.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
the
you were
title
saying
is
the same thing.
person,
Exactly.
basically. The deed is the property.
So if you have
Does that kind of make
yeah,
sense?
that does. If you have a contract and you have situations like I got the property in a divorce,
Right.
My husband has passed
I
away.
didn't get anything.
But you see what I mean? If those are stories that you probably want us to run title as early as possible to say, okay, well, when you ran title, and that's why I'll say sometimes, how well do you get along with your stepchildren?
I love my stepchildren.
Well, you're very lucky. Some people don't. The reason I say that is if
Well,
there's
they're
not,
still young,
if there's
too.
not- yeah, don't worry. But if there's not a will or you don't want to probate the will, then you're going to have to deal with them because in Texas, as of now, the spouse is the first to get in an heirship unless there's children from the deceased from a previous relationship.
Right.
If that is the case, then I'll ask. And if you go, I hate them. They're no good, disagreeable little bastards. And you have a will.
might be an issue.
You have a will that says you're to get everything. Then I would probably tell you to think about probating that will.
Correct. Because they're going to fight you.
They're going to fight, and just what we're chickens at heart. We would rather you pay for that than us pay for that because
Right.
people think we make the average title premium, and I'm sure some Norbert is going to go. Well, actually, it's 20.
Well, the
it's
average home now is what, $350,000?
something like that. If I were to, I usually throw out.
So
an
it would be the
average
premium for that. It'd be,
The average title policy, I just throw out. If I had them all, I just looked at a bunch of them.
what's a percent?
It's like it's a percent. We're fully regulated. So if you ever want to know, they would call you. We would do a rate
Call Texas
calculation.
Department of Insurance. It's on their website.
Yep. So the average is, let's say, $2,000 per deal. But remember, that's forever. It's not a
30
yearly,
years.
It could be forever. Well, it is forever because even if you sell your property,
Or even if it inherits.
Mm-hmm. that's exactly right. And then the title.
Of course, there's always something.
Well, there's something. It's a WOB average. It's the insurer. So we get 15% of that. So when I say we make $300 a deal, that's if you take the high and the low, and it's right around there. So
That's what I tell people.
So
and
you
they're
can
like,
see,
how do
well,
y'all make money? Well, we have to close a lot of deals.
And we have a claims. That's why we have a good claims ratio. We do have claims. If you have no claims,
But we don't want to have claims. We want to have good escrow officers.
We
We want
don't
to have
want-
good title.
we do.
We
We-
want to have good
here
lawyers.
are the claims that I want because you have to have some, or
Nobody's going to pay for it.
why would you have some? So we do have claims. I like for our claims to be things that we could not have stopped.
Right.
Like a missed this, not asking
Or
an additional question. That
3 transactions ago
right, something
that did not go through our title company.
Mm-hmm.
We had no way of knowing.
when we are pretty. That's part of my objective. Is any claims that I go to the board meeting on, there's nothing we could have done to stop it.
Right. Dave Ramsey did an episode about title insurance.
Oh yeah, I did.
And he talks about how he just think it was a ripoff.
Yeah.
And now he's just like, I've done 30,000 transactions in my lifetime. He's done a lot,
Yeah.
And he's like, go through title insurance. It's worth it because he's like, I've seen so many things that were unpredictable, there's no way we could have known. Fraud.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just certain things. So there's just no way for us to know.
It's another line of defense. to
And
go to a
this is
title
your
company.
biggest investment for most people. With him, if he didn't go through a title insurance company, it's not a high risk for him because, and he's even doing it.
Right.
And he's a financial guru.
He's a guru.
I don't believe everything he says. I don't go by everything he says, but I did take a Dave Ramsey course back in the day when he was doing them at church, and
Yeah.
I learned a ton about being debt free and
That's why I tell people
you're paying with cash.
And this is an investment that for a smaller amount.
This is your biggest investment. All of your money is going to this, and somebody can come along and take it from you.
There are claims every year. Title industry pays, and I think it's in the billions. It may be high millions, but we do pay, and even a smaller underwriter.
Is that in Texas or nationwide?
That's nationwide.
Yeah.
It varies depending. And the other thing that's people. Don't cry for us, Argentina.
But most of them are just little payouts, like a little lien.
Most of them are, but they add up.
And y'all could negotiate those payouts. We tried to.
Yeah.
But you also your attorney fees. It's not just paying off the debt.
Well, we try to resolve
paying
them
off
without
the heir that
attorney.
came
Right.
about. You also have attorney fees.
If we go that far, so
but they just use you because you're free.
Well,
right?
they paid for the policy, so we're not free. They got the title
you're free
policy.
for title insurance, right? We don't pay you. You work for free, don't you?
Yeah.
Because you love to do this.
I'm
You're a volunteer.
Sexton Hardcastle is not it's not a socialist. I don't know he's a libertarian, which who knows what that means. So
People think that lawyers just are out to get them, and rip them off. And I'm like, I feel like a lot of attorneys that I actually personally know are actually out trying to help people.
I can tell you right now why.
Maybe not criminal attorneys trying to keep bad people out of jail.
That's even another discussion for another day, because everybody has the right to effective counsel. And we're in a country, we'd rather have 100 guilty people leave to protect one innocent person, however you feel about that.
True.
So I believe in the process of that. I would tell you the thing that an attorney does have that other lines of work don't have is that silly little bar card. I mean, the state of Texas has said, blah, blah, or wherever you're from.
It's not easy to get that.
And it's not something you want to lose either. So you're very careful. You don't, where I think it's just, keep in mind, people only go to an attorney usually is if they have a problem.
Why do you think most people like you, why do you become an attorney? What made you decide? You were born into it?
No, God, no. I was a Kappa Sig, and I was trying to hook up with some young, I forget what sorority she was in. Tri-Sig, I remember now. And it sounded good. I said, yeah, go to law school. And it just kind of, then I took the law. So first it was just a ruse because I had no idea what I wanted to do. And it sounded cool, right, at parties. And then I just started thinking about it. And then my grandfather's like, you'd be really good at that.
And look at you
then
now.
I took the LSAT and did better.
You're the CEO or
CEO.
CEO of Worth National
Pretty impressed.
Insurance.
Yeah.
It took you how long to get there?
26 years. I
Wow.
started out evicting people out in California, and then first 5 years in title, I sat in it really was a dingy old library at First American and answered questions.
And you went to the Yale of Arizona?
Arizona State is the Yale of the desert, yes. And then went to law school and then went to night law school and worked full time. So I've been
meaning to look that up. Is that a pretty good law school in Arizona?
Arizona State, it's deceptively good, yeah.
Deceptively.
Well, we have our...
What about UT?
It's a great law school.
Because that's where my dad worked forever, and I grew
It's
up around all
an
these
amazing
attorneys.
law school. There's some amazing laws. Yeah,
people going to law school. Some of them were already attorneys, but they were going back for stuff, and they would sleep on the couches in there and just study.
Yeah.
My dad's like, "You should be a lawyer." I'm like, "I don't like to read that much."
It's a
lot of reading.
It's a lot of reading. It's a trade, like a carpenter, a arborist, a street paver. It's just a different trade. You learn how to talk and interpret rules. And
see, now I feel like I'm really interested in it.
well, there's never too late.
But back then I was not interested.
It's a grind. And I will tell you, at least for me, it was a trade school. It was a grind. It's 3 years of your life that you're just
grinding.
You
should probably live at home with your parents while you're doing it, because you can't really work.
If you can, well, you can. And just, I liked it.
Some of them were bartending at night and then going to school, and I'm like, how are you doing that?
You just do it. And then some of us have children in our third year, right before.
And a lot of them were very odd people.
Wow, I guess
at UT anyway.
Oh, no,
keep Austin weird.
We're some weird.
Dreadlocks.
There's some weird dudes.
Hippie attorneys.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then you have like the really out there, like nerdy Sheldon Coopers of law. You're just like, they can't have like a regular conversation.
No, but you need them. One thing I do like about the law. Those are the people
that always scared me. I was like, ooh.
Well, you don't usually see them on podcasts.
No, those people are like
writing and brilliant. They're brilliant. Don't get me wrong.
They're the ones that are working for the government, judges and
things of that.
Yeah, it would be cool to be a judge, but I would be afraid for my life. Because isn't it a lot of people that work in like judges and stuff, attorneys, they're not listed on like the CAD because
right.
They don't want people to know where they live because people will kill them. That's kind of risky. I feel like your job is not risky.
Not anymore.
I mean, if you deny a claim, maybe.
When I used to evict people in California, it was because people were really not happy when I was the one.
They did away with evictions in Harris County right now?
They have in some areas for a variety of reasons.
They're saying Montgomery might be next.
That's
So if
a
you're
whole
an investor, sell now and
well,
call me.
it is a constitutional
title.
question as far, because remember, we'll leave it this. One of the three things that we have is, the right pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, how do you not evict people
Well,
from
the
a property that you own that they're
that's
trashing?
therein lies the fundamental rub, which we could talk about next time, is because Thomas Jefferson took a guy named, I think it's Thomas Paine, and he says life, liberty, and property. And Thomas Jefferson said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So the pursuit of happiness is in our Constitution. It's the ability to freely own real estate, which dovetails to...
I thought the pursuit of happiness was finding Jesus.
Well, I mean, I don't know about that. I don't know if Thomas Jefferson was, he had those other issues, but anyway, but the point is that that pursuit of happiness is ingrained into the American spirit of owning property, and we want to.
Yeah.
We want to.
I mean, owning property does make you happy sometimes.
It's
Like,
certainly
especially if
the
you own
next
a lot
step.
of it, and you can go out there and do what you want.
Or if you have yours,
shoot guns
Well,
and
you shoot guns, or
grow
just if you have your
things, build things.
Or it's a hell of a lot better than paying. Not the wrong with paying rent, but if I had a choice, I'd rather pay the same amount of money for something I own if I can afford the taxes.
So
and
I'm
the
just not
investment.
into like living in neighborhoods where there's a bunch of rules. I don't want to pay money to pay a lot of money, taxes and HOA fees, and then you have all these rules. It's like you don't even own it because they have a bunch of rules.
But you went in there knowing
can't
that.
shoot anything.
Well, then don't go in.
Yeah, I'm not into it.
That's why I tell people when they talk about.
But some people love it because they're like, I want all the rules because I want to make sure my neighbors aren't
I like the
shooting
rule.
guns
Well,
off
people aren't
and
allowed to
painting
live-
their house crazy colors and
Or my
leaving
neighborhood.
car parts everywhere.
Yeah, my neighborhood, they're not allowed to look at me in the eyes. They have to divert their eyes when I walk by them.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
in Wood Forest.
Yeah.
Come on. That's the
in there.
most friendly neighborhood I've ever
No,
been in.
I have to allow them to. Otherwise, in the covenants,
It's so cool.
they're not allowed to look at
All
me.
of my friends, so I live we had to move to the Woodlands for my stepkids. That's where they
Right.
are. And so when we were looking, the area we are in is the very back north corner, so I could still be close to Wood Forest. I wanted to be in Wood Forest, but it wasn't in the same school district
No.
as my stepkids. It was just too logistically hard to have kids separately in different school districts,
Sure,
different schedules.
Sure.
Driving to my stepkid's mom's house all the time because they forget stuff. It was just kind of a nightmare. And there's no cell phone service in Wood Forest. We
Well,
went
we
to a
don't-
house. I fell in love with it, and there was zero cell
Right.
phone
We
service.
still don't. We have it's in our HOA because we don't want outsiders bothering us.
Well, I like it when I visit my friends, but I
I
can't.
mean, when you check in at the check,
I got to be able to stalk my kids,
Yeah, well, if you check in at the gates, or we put you under the, we review you, allow you to come in or not. We want to make sure that you can't call out.
They didn't review
Yes.
Bigfoot when he came.
Well, he was past. Well, the gates were closed.
He just jumped over.
Well, he's Bigfoot. He can do that. So, do you think we learned a lot about title insurance? I think more than if people. What I would want people to get out of this is that title insurance is an essential part of the real estate process. Compared to the investment, it's relatively small. Claims do happen, but also you get paid to clear title issues, which you need
Right.
to get a house. Because if you want
Right.
a loan, unless you're buying
Yeah.
cash,
We get $300, but we did all the work.
which is
to
fine,
make
'cause-
sure-
but we make it up on volume, and
Right.
don't worry, we're going to be fine. But the essence of what you're getting for that price far outweighs
Right.
the risk, and title claims do happen.
Right.
But remember,
And the rest goes to the state, which goes into a pool, basically,
Right,
to
we
pay
have-
out claims for other people. And,
Well,
and if you
it-
think about it, it's kind of like a charity. So
well, it
to
does-
protect other people.
because sometimes, and it's rare, title companies do go under, and with
Yeah.
that, rarely.
Title
do-
companies that are not doing their research, mostly.
there's commonality when they don't do well. And
If you read the papers or
can figure out.
the internet, I say the papers, I'm old. Not as old as you, but
Yeah.
I'm old. When you read these articles and they talk about why this title company went under, everything I've ever read says basically they weren't doing their due diligence to make sure that things were cleared. They were just writing property insurance or title insurance to make money, and they didn't care if the property was
that
cleared.
and sometimes
And that's the thing about some of these attorneys. I feel like we saw one come in, like I was saying earlier, these two attorneys, they wrote this thing out. And then when the people tried to go back and get help, the attorneys were sorry.
I make no comment because I don't know the facts.
Right. So, but I'm just saying, I know you have to be an attorney and not say anything, but this was my experience. And so my warning to people is make sure that you go through a title company. Make sure that you go through a good title company that's going to answer the phone when you need help. I answer the phone. Christy answers the phone. Angel, Tiffany, Gwen, you answer the phone. Scott answers the phone. Chris answers the phone. Sophia answers the phone. Kim answers the phone. Deborah answers the phone. All these people that I work with, I know if I text or call them, I'm going to hear back from them very quickly. Whether it's a text, hey, I'm in a meeting or an event, I'll call you here in an hour or 2 hours or whatever. But I always get a response where I've worked places before. That has not been the case for me at all. And I closed with several different title companies when I was a realtor. Right. And I left a title company that I used to work for because they didn't answer the phone or return emails. And I'm glad you left and now you're with me.
There you go. Stuck. Well, I appreciate
I do love our company.
I do too.
And so Worth National Insurance, Title Insurance, that is the underwriter for McKnight.
That's correct.
So Scott McKnight owns both.
Yes, he does.
And so why did y'all name it Worth?
A couple things. It was simple. People, you're worthy. Partners worth having. Plus, it was the holding company of Scott's existing companies.
Insurance, yeah.
He's
from he's not from Fort Worth.
He's a Fort Worth guy, but
he's from Oklahoma, right?
Right, he's from Oklahoma. Yeah. I mean, we have agents throughout the state. It was just, it's a strong name. Plus, you don't want to overthink it, and I'll leave you with this. Van Halen, the mighty Van Halen, when they were thinking of names, they had like Daddy Longlegs and all these weirdo names. And David Lee Roth said, Van Halen. It's a cool name. That's a
cool name.
There was nothing beyond that. It was just Van Halen.
Y'all just thought Worth is a cool name.
I thought it was a pretty.
I like it.
I do, and we have Norma Scott, our director.
I wish I thought about it like Worth title, like.
Right. So it was an existing company. It's strong. You can play on words. Are you worthy? Partners worth having.
The half bull face.
It just looks menacing, but not too menacing. It's like playful. But could get.
But we're like serious.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. A bull. Yeah, it was going to be it really wasn't going to be anything but a bull. That kind of came along pretty easy. And I'll give Chris.
What was your original drawing?
Well, we can't talk about it, but the it was just a more defined version of a bull. This one's much better for everybody. So
more appropriate.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I love it.
Well,
I was very excited when y'all launched it and I heard about it.
It's exciting. We've been 4 months, 5 months.
I feel like it makes us stronger as a title company because
it certainly does. And we're not the first to do this. There are other strong competitors that have their own title company or
that aren't like big corporate.
Right. I'll give credit's due. Bill Shattuck started one with Capital Title, First National, which is an amazing company. Southland Title started Texan Title.
They closed here. They're not in this area.
Well, I don't know, but they're a super strong agency statewide.
I wonder why their office closed.
And I don't know, but I do know they're super awesome. And
yeah.
And then look, not every idea has to be. You don't always have to be the first. Just be the best.
Well, and there's plenty of business to go around.
There is, and what I think the consumer is finding out with those, and the others included, is they get that more local touch, personal touch, because they have answer the phone.
You can get people's cell phone numbers.
I
can give out George's cell phone number, by the way. If anybody needs it, call me. I have it. I can give it to you. He loves when people call him.
I do,
especially like late at night.
Love it.
Wow.
All right.
Well, it's time for us to.
Time to scoot.
Hit the road.
I'm on the road. Well, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, we'll have to do this again. There's always more to talk about, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well,
it's ever-changing.
Ever-changing. Well, there'll be some changes coming up. So, and I think after next month, there are going to be even more changes. So.
Yeah, we'll wait till after the election and see if we're still here.
We'll be here.
People are saying the world's going to end.
It's not going to end. We're fine. We're going to be fine. Don't worry. I tell people just take a deep breath.
There's too many people in this country that
there's too many people
want good for the country, and
there's a lot of
guns in the country. Yeah. I just feel like
Well, and I don't even disagree. I think everybody wants what's best, and whatever their definition of what best is, that's for people to determine and vote on.
That's why it's a free country.
But yeah, I don't think anybody is out for malicious purposes. Just
I wouldn't say nobody.
I would say that if
majority.
Most people have, even if you don't agree with their methodology or procedures,
Right.
you would be hard pressed to say, and that's what George.
There's
Bush,
not a lot of serial killers running around.
No, that would be a cool movie though. Like if the president was a serial killer on the side.
Hey, that's a good idea.
It is.
We
On
should
that
do
note,
it.
that would be cool.
Let's do it, Dick. Can you do that? Can you make movies?
I think they did one, but I think it was
Pretty
one where the
technical.
president got crazy with his mistress and killed her in the Oval Office, and Wesley Snipes kind of shut it down.
Isn't that like a vampire movie?
No, that's Blade. That's something different.
Isn't he? Oh,
Wesley Snipes in his prime,
yeah.
he had a run where he had some pretty badass movies. I mean, there was a
Yeah, he was cool.
the year of there was like a 6-year, 7-year period where Wesley
Early
Snipes
90s.
was man, come on,
Yeah.
poor Wesley.
Poor. Why? What happened to him?
That's the tease. We'll call it a tease for the next show.
All right, George. Well, thank you for coming on
Thank
the show
you for
today.
having me.
And we'll see you again.
I'll see y'all.
Bye.
Bye.